Have you ever scolded your child for something they've done? Maybe it's after they've hit a friend or their younger sibling, or it was after the 10th time you've asked them to put their shoes on. Yep, me too. But what if those moments of misbehavior are actually moments of missed connection? Welcome to the very first episode of Mum to Mum with Doctor Tash, a new series in the Mums at the Table podcast lineup, alongside our monthly podcast, Life in the Grey. I'm Melody, project leader of Mums at the Table and mum to an energetic 9-year-old boy. Each episode, I'll be chatting with paediatrician and fellow mum, Dr. Natasha Ching, or as we call her, Doctor Tash. We'll be having honest conversations about parenting, the messy, beautiful, complicated bits, and offering practical, compassionate support from one mum to another. In today's episode, we're starting with something foundational to how we parent: connection before correction. This episode is based on the article Dr. Tash wrote for Mums at the Table titled What Your Child Really Needs First. If you haven't read it yet, you'll definitely want to check it out at mumsattethetable.com. We'll pop the link in the show notes. Now, let's get into it. Welcome, Dr. Tash.
Thanks for the introduction. It's nice to see you again, Melody.
So in your article, you write this powerful line: correction without connection can feel like rejection. That really stopped me. Rejection. I don't think anyone listening to this likes the idea of rejecting their children, but it seems like we may be doing it accidentally. So why does correction without connection feel like rejection?
Yeah. I think that line came not just from parenting and my own professional expertise, but honestly from reflecting on my own past too. And I think so many of us can remember times as kids when we've gotten into trouble. And what really hurt wasn't the punishment, it was the disconnection, that moment of feeling misunderstood or left alone in our distress. And from a brain perspective, children are wired for connection. Their sense of emotional safety comes from us, especially the primary caregiver. And when connection feels threatened, particularly in those moments of emotional distress or after they've messed up, their nervous system can interpret that as rejection. And so when you look at brain development, the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain that's responsible for things like reasoning, reflection, planning, impulse control, emotional regulation, it doesn't actually fully mature until we're in our mid-20s. And that means that even when our kids or teens seem quite articulate or mature, they're really still developing these core skills, and they will be for years, even into adulthood. But when we feel overwhelmed or emotionally unsafe, and this is as applicable to adults as it is to children, the amygdala takes over. And that's the part of the brain that's like an internal alarm system. And that's the thing that triggers like fight, flight, or freeze, which people have often heard of before. And it's a survival response. It's designed to protect us from an imminent threat. And actually, how it works is that part of the brain not only activates, it actually suppresses the prefrontal cortex, which means that not only have you got in kids an underdeveloped or immature prefrontal cortex that's still developing the ability to have emotional regulation, when you've had the amygdala kick in, you've then gone and stomped on that and suppressed its ability to do anything. And so in that moment, your ability to manage emotions or make a good decision is just completely out the window. And so an analogy that I can give you would be, imagine being in a building that's on fire. The alarms are blazing, lights are flashing, your heart is racing, and then someone turns to you while you're trying to evacuate this building to go, now let me explain what you should have done differently. It's just not going to go. Like, nothing is sinking in your brain at that moment because you're simply trying to survive. And as ridiculous as that sounds, that's actually what's happening to the child's brain. That when we try and teach or correct whilst they're in that meltdown mode, the part of the brain that can receive reflection, regulation, lessons, learning is actually completely offline. And instead of that landing as well, this is what I should have done, they just get this sense of disconnection because they might not actually remember even what they did wrong. They might not remember feeling bad. They might not remember what you said at all, but they can remember how they felt and that they felt alone in those moments. And so when we take that pause and we connect, what we're really sending is that signal that you're safe, I'm with you. And once they feel safe again and the nervous system is able to settle, the prefrontal cortex comes back online, so the thinking brain is back, and that's when learning can actually happen. And so it doesn't mean we don't set boundaries and we don't correct. It just means that by connecting first, it makes correction actually possible. Because without that connection, that's when that internalized memory of feeling bad or believing they were bad comes across as feeling rejected, feeling alone, feeling isolated in that moment.
It's interesting what you said because it's made me reflect on exactly what happened yesterday and what happens regularly, right? About this the need that kids have to connect because whenever my son does something wrong, and even if I don't say anything, right, he knows it. He knows he's done something
Mm.
wrong because he's at that age, like he's 9-year-old. So he knows he's done something wrong, or either something shows in my face. And the first thing he says is, "Do you still love me?"
Mhm.
And it just suddenly made me realize how much that craving for connection happens, especially if they've done something wrong.
It is fundamentally the most important thing for human beings to be connected to another. We're not made to be isolated by ourselves and completely alone. And so whether you're 2 weeks old, or 20 years old, or 80 years old, there's actually an innate desire to connect with other people. And that's also true in a different topic, but that's still just as true in neurodivergent individuals. That there is a fundamental need for connection with other people, and so it's that seeking of belonging, that seeking of love, and if you're feeling disconnected or cut off from the person that matters to you most, then you drive that desire to reconnect to that person, even if it means having to change something or suppress something so that you can do so. Yeah.
Which is like, oh wow. And then the other thing that you said as well is like, oh, right up to their 20. Oh my goodness, that's a long time.
Well, it is a long time. The developing brain is still developing until mid-20s. It's not that you have the same level of developing brain. So a toddler's brain is obviously far less developed than a teenager's brain. But I think it helps to realize that, sometimes teenagers can come across incredibly mature, and it's just like we can project on them that, well, you're an adult now. It's like the thing is that they're actually fundamentally not. They can be incredibly mature, incredibly wise, have a good grasp and understanding on many things, but emotionally they're still developing. Most 18-year-olds don't think so, but in truth, that they actually are.
It's interesting. So, in terms of even no matter what their age are, right, if right down to when they're developing, what you seem to imply in your article is that a lot of our kids, when they behave, so whether it's a toddler or a teenager, a lot of how they behave might have to do with how they feel. So when we focus only on behavior, it makes them believe that their big feelings are being punished and not supported. And you write that children internalize messages from this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the beliefs. What kind of beliefs do you think actually get formed out of that, and what are the risks involved?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you pick up on that, because I think it is a core part of the message. Because when we do focus on the behavior alone, so stopping the crying, the shouting, the defiance, but we skip over what's really going on underneath, that can leave that disconnection feeling to the child with the caregiver, or feeling misunderstood and alone in their feelings. Now, obviously, every child is different. Really important to recognize that. There is no, one size fits all, every child is the same, and temperament plays a role. So you get some kids and adults that are really highly sensitive and are going to be far more sensitive than others, some that are far more resilient in terms of their ability to tolerate aspects of that. But all children are still, as we just said, and all adults are fundamentally wired for connection. And for many, when moments of emotional disconnection happen over a repeated period of time, they start to internalize message such as my big feelings are not okay. Or sometimes even there's something wrong with me when I have these feelings. And that when this happens, children don't simply change what they do, they start to change who they are because they want to stay connected. And I sort of alluded to that before, like, you're trying to fundamentally stay connected. And so if this is going to disconnect me from the person I care about the most, then I've got to suppress this. And so instead of learning, I can feel this and someone will help me through it, they start to believe things like my feelings push people away. Or if I want to stay close to my mum or to my dad or whoever it might be, I cannot show this part of me because it's either too big for them to handle or it's an unaccepted aspect of how I feel. Even things like I'm only loved when I'm easy or I'm only loved when I'm good. And depending on how that shaming aspect of things go, it can become I'm a bad kid because I have big feelings. And so remembering that, going back to that first point and the fire alarm sort of moment, they're not remembering the content of what happened in that real big feeling sort of moment. So what they are taking away is something happened that wasn't okay in my mum or my dad's eyes, and they stepped away from me, as in like emotionally stepped away from me. And I felt alone in that moment and I didn't like that. And so that's where it comes back to, okay, well, why was that? Oh, I'm a bad kid because I pushed my mum away because I was too much. It was too big of feelings. And that's kind of where the risk lies, because when those big feelings aren't supported, they don't actually learn to regulate them. They learn to suppress them. But the feeling doesn't disappear, they just get pushed down. And then they can sometimes and often will resurface as things like anxiety or aggression, withdrawal, perfectionism. Guilty. People pleasing, like, the list sort of goes on. A lot of those coping mechanism traits, for lack of a better term, that we develop as adults have come from not having those feelings held or feeling like they weren't allowed. And so having different ways to manage them, if that makes sense. And if you think about it, so many adults in therapy can point to moments in their childhood where they felt misunderstood or emotionally alone. And that's not saying that their parents are bad. It's not saying that their parents were even intentionally trying to do that. It's just how they've internalized that experience, and especially when it's happened a lot. And those are the moments that often shape how we as adults then relate to our own feelings and emotions. And I mean, I know that this is certainly true for my story. And that I suppose if you can get parents listening, let's reword that. I can also totally understand at this moment that there would be some parents who are hearing this right now going, oh my goodness, this is so overwhelming, and thinking things like, oh no, I'm going to mess up my kids like my parents messed up me. And I'm just going to say, pause for a second. If that's you, please go back and listen to our previous interview on rupture and repair, because the goal is not perfection. We will all get it wrong sometimes. I do. And beating yourself up helps no one. What matters is that we notice, we reflect, and we repair. So you don't have to get it perfect, and that's okay. Like, if you've had these moments where you've, failed to meet the emotional needs of your kid, or you're turning around going, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I just did. Like, it's not the end of the world. You can repair that. And something as simple as, I'm sorry that I yelled before. I was feeling overwhelmed. Next time I'll try and take a breath, step away for a moment before I react. Doesn't mean you always will get that right, but that matters. It shows the child that, one, they feel safe again, but two, I'm not to blame. Like, mum or dad were able to acknowledge just then that actually they were feeling some big feelings as well. It wasn't just that it was all about me. It wasn't that I was the problem. And that's really where the modelling of emotional repair and stuff comes from too. Because the message we want our kids to take away is, and remembering the brain is still developing to the mid-20s, is that my big feelings are hard, but they're not bad. And I'm not bad for having them, and I will get through them. And that's where the foundation for emotional resilience comes. And it really comes from how we start responding when those big feelings come.
So I'm going to talk practical here, but before that, I should mention that I'll pop the link to the rupture and repair interview in the show notes, so that every one of us who need it will watch it. Because I'm just hearing what you're saying and hearing about what the kids internalize, and I'm going, oh, I'm so sad. It's just so sad hearing what they internalize, and I feel really bad as well because I've done it before. But yes, the rupture and repair episode is really helpful in helping me move on.
And just putting back on that, it's a lot of people, if you haven't grown up with this, a lot of people will turn around and have those moments of going, oh my goodness, I've done this. Like, is this what my child's thinking? It is not our intent. No parent, or very few parents, are ever trying to harm their children. People are doing the very best they can with the information they have in that moment. And fundamentally, if you're trying hard for your kid, you are a good parent. And that's really, really important to always remember. This is not about shame. Not about shame for the child and not about shame for us, because shame achieves absolutely nothing than beating us up as an individual and our self-worth. And so I think that's really, really important to recognize in moments of these sort of conversations that are hard. It's not easy. And that, in that, you're not deliberately trying to internalize that message in your child. When a parent's done that, that's not the intent. It's a unfortunate consequence of an underdeveloped brain, how it's responded to that in that moment. Sorry to interrupt. Just thought that was important to emphasize.
Yes. Oh, definitely. And I think it's great. So let's talk practical here, right? You're talking about the fact that it's something that we all do, and I agree because I definitely do it. So we want to change.
Mm-hmm.
We want to change how we react to our kids. But what does it look like in the heat of the moment? You're tired, you're stressed, you're running late, you're cleaning with beaks off the ceiling. What is this new response that we should have?
Yeah. So it's when it gets real, right? And look, first things first. Remember what I said before and what I just said then. We all make mistakes, and perfection is not the goal. So don't forget the repair matters far more than the rupture. And when you make a mistake, that's okay. It's going back, going, okay, well, we'll try and do better next time. And you might not, but self-compassion, really, really important in this sort of work. And let's be honest, unless you've done a lot of self-work, have an unbelievably chilled temperament, or grew up with incredible role models who stayed calm in the thick of things, then let's be real. In some of those sort of moments where you're highly stressed, on the edge, almost at breaking point, you've got the Weet-Bix on the roof and you're due to be somewhere to drop your kid, and then you've got a meeting afterwards and you're just going, I can't cope. Let's be honest. Most of us will rupture more often than we won't. And that's called being human. So I think that's really important to recognize that, we all have a threshold. We're not going to just be perfect parents. And that's not the goal. Also, you cannot parent from an empty cup. You cannot be your best self when you're at breaking point. And so a foundational need is actually, in having a connected response, is actually having good self-care and recognizing that looking after yourself is a part of looking after your kids. Because if you're at breaking point, you can't show up for them in the way that they need you to, or that you want to, because you're barely holding it above the surface. Like, treading water. You're trying to tread water and barely drowning. Put something on top of you, what's going to happen? Your head goes under. And so there is only so much you can ever expect from yourself in that, if that makes sense. And yes, if this approach is new and you didn't grow up with this kind of parenting, the shift is huge, because it goes against what so many of us experienced growing up, where quick compliance was the goal and behaviour was managed swiftly, and usually through fear, punishment, or withdrawal of connection and love. And connection-based parenting is not letting things slide. It's staying anchored and emotionally present even when things are messy and unpleasant. And that takes so much practice. And so it doesn't mean being calm all the time. It just means being real, and being authentic, and also recognizing our own roles in it and being able to come back and model repair and reconnection when we do make mistakes. And so in the moment, what does it look like? Pause. Like whenever our initial responses and our reactions to everything that we do, even when you do this sort of work, the initial internal response is usually not quite what you want to do. And so there is an importance in actually pausing, taking a breath, and just having a moment before you try and respond. Because if you instantly respond, you will go with what you know best. That's just humanity. Second bit is then check in with you. Check in with ourselves. Check in with me. What's happening in me right now? Am I triggered because I'm worried I'm about being late? Am I embarrassed in this moment? Is this stirring up something from my own past or childhood? Because a lot of the time it's not just the behavior that's occurring in front of us. It's actually how we feel in that moment. And I know that that's true for me. It's the unconscious internal beliefs that we have that are driving that response, if that makes sense. And then in that, once we've checked in on ourselves, and sometimes it might be, oh, I need a moment. Like I'm very triggered and I need a moment because right now I can't just be my best self. And that might be a moment to take a breath or turning around and going, look, I'm sorry, I'll be right back. And yes, it's like, but you're not connecting in that moment. It's like, well, if all you're going to do is explode in that moment, then you're better off going, I'll be right back. Like mummy needs a moment. And there's a huge amount of success in actually doing so because you've managed to step aside for a second. Anyway, when you're actually of the headspace to be able to do so, is to try and get curious. What's going on under this? It doesn't mean excusing everything. It just means trying to understand what's the driving factor behind it. So instead of thoughts like, and let's be honest, things that have gone like, what on earth were you thinking? What's wrong with you? Let's be honest, we've all had those thoughts that go through our minds. It's trying to shift to, I saw you hit your brother and I can see you're really upset. What happened? Because, sometimes we don't actually know. We've seen part of the event. We've certainly seen what happened maybe, but the question you're trying to ask is what was the driving factor behind it? And, occasionally it's a justified feeling like, you've worked really hard on building this full construction tower you're super proud of and your toddler brother goes charging through it and crashes it down. Like we're all going to feel pretty upset in that moment. The feeling is justified. Behavior is not, but the feeling is justified. And the lesson we're trying to teach our kids is how do I manage that feeling in the future? But in that moment, obviously they're dysregulated. That's not what it is. It's just trying to understand and show curiosity as to, okay, tell me your story, basically. It might be it looks like something's been really hard for you. Would you like to tell me about it? And let's be honest, sometimes kids don't have the words early on, but when you show those sort of moments continuously, they can start to give you something, or little bits. And it might, depending on the age of the child, they may be more or less articulate. Depending on how often it's been done, they can also respond differently. So if it's new, it's like, this is strange. Why are you asking me this? It's like, I'm not going to engage right now. If they're little, then it's just like, I don't yet have the words. And so it's not always that you're going to get these beautiful articulate responses, especially because often they don't understand the feeling that's going on. It's been an automated reaction. And so it's still working through, but it's trying to work on, I'm staying connected with you in that. And in those really, really hard moments, remember, if you're at breaking point and all you manage to do is achieve not making it worse, that is a tremendous win. So being able to go, I am going to lose my bundle right now and go, I'm really sorry. Mummy needs a moment. I will be back, and shutting a door, even if you've got a dysregulated child in that moment, so that you can calm yourself down before you respond, is actually a huge success. Huge success. And I think that shouldn't be underestimated either. That's reality. That's real life.
It makes me feel good because I've done that a few times. I'll be like, I need to go. I need to walk away right now.
Yep. And look, when you do that a lot, especially when you get to children your age and older, they often will start to realize it's like, okay, she means business at this moment. Like, this is not the moment to push it. Like, if I want to get an explosion, this is when I push it. But if I let her go, she might calm down. Like, they learn to realize it in those moments. It's like, okay, you really do need to go. Like,
I think I like what you said about the fact that you have to just keep trying and train them to the point where they actually know how to recognize it. Because I have discovered that in the, parenting my kid for 9 years now. And in the last probably couple of years, I have actually noticed that what he started to do is tell me before he starts, exploding. He actually tells
Mm.
me, he go, I'm really frustrated right now and I need some time. And then
And that's
he'll take himself
fantastic.
off into his room.
Yep, and that is fantastic. That is modeling, like that is recognizing and actually being emotionally in tune to one's own needs and going, basically, I'm starting to feel dysregulated. I yet to explode, but if I don't manage this right now, I'm going to get there. And there's so many of us that have learned to suppress that but we all have a threshold that you get to the adult where it's just like, where did that eruption come from? Like the volcano looked chilled, and then next second it blew up. Whereas and that's the illustration of that. We never learnt to handle that, so we suppress, but there comes a point where it's just too much, and a pressure cooker gets released, volcanic
Yeah.
explosion occurs. But when kids can do that young, when we can teach them to be in tune with their own needs, then they're actually intervening before they get there, and doesn't mean they're never going to get there.
Oh,
But it's such a healthy step to be able to work on emotional regulation, because it's the steps towards it.
but yeah,
So
it
well
does take
done.
time. Thanks. But oh my goodness, it takes time because most of the time you go like, is this really working? Half the time it's just like, oh, I don't know. But yeah, I think what I'm trying to tell everyone listening is that you will get no response for 5 years and suddenly it'll be like, oh, they actually get it.
Yep. Yep. It's so true. And in those moments you're like, oh, it is working.
Yeah.
There's just these little wins that come, but
Yeah.
it doesn't. It's a lot of consistency. It's a lot of consistency, a
Yeah.
lot of patience, and at the times the non-patience when you then go back and repair.
Oh, a lot of
And
mistakes.
yeah, and we're human, and that's okay. It's just taking the steps forward, and improving the awareness is such a big step.
It's interesting that you said that about taking the pause in the heat of the moment because,
Mm.
all right, first up, the confession is that I did not take a pause. Um, so I did lose it. This just happened yesterday. So we were trying to get him to do homework and he was, fussing around, delaying, coming, sitting on the couch instead. The minute I stepped away, he would do something else. I had to sit right next to him. I was getting really frustrated and I came down hard on him. And then I took the pause, which, I should have taken the pause before, but I took the
We're
pause
human.
afterwards. And then I realized, hang on, this lack of connection, because he did ask me, do you still love me? And this lack of connection that had happened wasn't because, yes, I was frustrated that he wasn't doing his homework. But my main frustration was that I wanted him to finish it in 2 hours so that I could get some friends. Some friends wanted to come over in the afternoon. And I'm like, if you finish it in 2 hours, friends can come over and we can have fun. And that's when I realized, hang on, all of this that was pushing me wasn't so much the he's not doing his homework, was the fact that I wanted it done in 2 hours so that I can have friends come over.
Mm. Yep. It's our the impact of our own expectations on things when we've got, this is the way things are going to go. This is the way I'd like things to be. Oh, something's disrupting that. That's really frustrating me. And then our kids, a lot of a lot of emotional communication is not the words we speak. It's actually the non-verbal stuff. They sense our tension, they sense our tone, they sense everything else, and so they feed off. Oh, something's going on. What's going on? You're a bit. And so then they play up on that, and then it becomes this vicious sort of backwards and forwards cycle. So it's amazing the impact. I look at it in my own life all the time, and when the days that things go worse isn't the right word, but the bigger the explosions, or when there has been those moments, there's usually been an expectation or this is the way I would like things to be, that hasn't been met. And then in that moment, it's like, oh, okay,
Yep,
this was semi me.
definitely. Oh, and kids are so sensitive. They pick up on how you feel very, very quickly.
You don't have to say a word, they know.
Yep.
Or when your words disconnect, so you can say the right thing that's coming out of your mouth, but if your body language, your tone, and everything else is saying something else, they will hear that, especially emotional language, they hear that far more.
Now, connected parenting. You touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to talk about these myths because I know that some people will think that connected parenting is just being too permissive and not teaching kids discipline or not disciplining your children.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. How do you have boundaries and still lead with connection?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. And I think that it's really common. I see people interpret at times that if you're emotionally in tune, it means you're letting your child walk all over you, and that's not at all the case. Being connected does not mean being permissive. Permissive is actually really not what your child needs. Connection and boundaries are not opposite; they go hand in hand. But the thing is, whilst kids need boundaries, the boundary is to tell them that you're safe. I'm here. I can hold this. I can be the bigger and stronger person, which is a circle of security term. If you haven't heard of it before, a very, very good parenting course that's worth looking at as a side note. But at the same time, wiser and kinder. And I think that that's where we sometimes struggle, and where, you know, we've had this swing towards permissiveness because we've grown up in this more of authoritarian sort of style of things where it's been like, no, I am the bigger, stronger person. This is what you'll do. Whereas what we need is the really kind, loving response where it's like, no, I'm going to hold this boundary. I know you don't like it and you don't have to like it. That's okay. But I'm holding the boundary because I'm still the adult and it's still my responsibility to look after you, to guide you, to keep you safe. But I also appreciate and respect that you have feelings about this and you might not like this. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to like my boundary. You don't even have to like me in that moment while I set that boundary. And I think that's where the myth sort of comes. Like, people think, oh, I've got to always please my child. If I'm being a connected parent, I've always got to be, they've always got to be like what I'm doing or be connected with me in the setting of, like, you know, we're happy friends. But that's not what connection is. Connection is going, I'm with you. I'm here, whether it's good, bad, ugly, and I will hold the line and be able to be the person, the strength that you need when you can't hold it together, if that makes sense. And that steadiness is, especially when things are hard, is what helps grow resilience and with time self-regulation as well. But with those boundaries, it's how we set them. As I said, firm and kind at the same time. You can hold the limit without shaming your child. And, like, you know, small illustration, it's like, child's upset about bedtime. They don't want to stop playing. That's okay. They're allowed to feel that way. A connected response might be something like, I know you're having such a great time and it's really hard to stop. It's okay to feel disappointed, but it is time to start packing up now. They might lose it. They're not going to love you for it necessarily. There's very few children and adults in that moment where they're like, I really wanted something and you've said no, that are going to go, oh, thank you so much for saying no. I really appreciate that.
If only. I'll go to
Um,
bed now, Mummy.
Oh, I feel great about it because you acknowledged that I felt sad. No, they're not going to. Holding doesn't mean that they're suddenly going to love your boundary. The boundary stays, but it's saying, I still care about how you feel about this, and I'm okay with sitting with the fact that you don't like this, and that's okay. And then the second one about discipline, I think it's a misunderstanding of what discipline is. So I think discipline is incredibly important, but I'm going to define discipline as guidance, teaching, and character shaping. So you're trying to build who it is our role to raise children that have good moral compass, that aren't just doing whatever they choose. We do need to guide them. It's an important part of parenting. It's very, very intentional, but that's not punishment. That's not, because of this, you can't do this, or you're bad, or this. It's going, okay, how do I teach you to be better? How do I guide you to be better? How do I teach you how to understand a better response in this moment than what might have been the one you just did. And let's be honest, even as adults, we still have moments where it's like, yeah, I could have done that better. And so, now we do that to ourselves. But if we set our kids up to learn that, this is how mum and dad do it with me, we set them up then as adults that they self-reflect and go, oh, okay, all right, wasn't my best self. No shame. How do I do better next time? And then even if they fall short, it's not shame. It's okay, I fell short. I'm human. That's okay. How do I do better next time? And so it's a growth journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so, because it sounds a bit like this is what I'm thinking, what you've just saying about connected parenting, right? What connected parenting, some people might think, is kind of like mollycoddling your kid and going, oh, you're feeling this, you're feeling that, let's make you feel better. But that's not what it is. It's about recognizing you're feeling this and that is okay.
Yes.
But that doesn't change what the reality is.
Yes,
That
absolutely.
doesn't
And that
change my boundaries.
100%. And that's because that's what life shows. It's like you're not going to love everything that happens in life. And if you've been taught or modeled that, I always have to be happy in life, then you're really set up for a big fall when you hit reality in adulthood, because that's not the response that the world is going to give you. What you're teaching is resilience. What you're teaching is, yes, big emotions are hard. You're allowed to have those big emotions. However, let's learn better how we might express those big emotions in a way that's appropriate. And that's going, where are you at developmentally? Let's show you kindness, compassion, and grace while we journey through this together. And so it really, what connected parenting is teaching co-regulation throughout life. It's going, I recognize that you're not born with this skill. And so I need to help you journey this. And so I'm going to be that support person for you for as long as you do or don't need. And then as the child ages, as they get further along, there's an almost natural pulling back in ways where you give them more autonomy. If you parent a 20-year-old in the same way you parent a 3-year-old, you are going to have some big problems. And so it's not, there's one size fits all the whole way through life. It's journeying together through those big feelings and going, the feeling is okay, even if the behavior is not, but that doesn't change who you are. You're good. You're fundamentally good. You're just having a really hard time at the moment, and let's work through this together.
And so, we don't have to bulldoze the obstacle that's making you feel bad, but we can work through it together on how we can overcome the obstacle.
Yep, absolutely.
Very, very helpful. I know we've covered quite a lot, but if there's just one takeaway that you want, anyone listening to remember from this idea of connection before correction, what would it be?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think honestly, I would want to go back to that building on fire analogy. In those moments when we pause, even that quick pause we take as parents, I think that it would really help to remember in those moments that whilst you can't see the fire or hear the alarms, essentially that's what's happening to your child's nervous system when they're totally dysregulated. Their brain is literally in survival mode, and trying to teach in that moment, correct in that moment, is the equivalent of someone walking up to you whilst you're trying to evacuate a building and going, hey, let's talk about what you could have done differently. It's just not going to land. And I think that, I know that sounds like such ridiculous imagery, but I think, in that moment's pause, if we can remind ourselves, hang on, it's not that they're trying to be defiant. It's that their brain, the part of their brain that receives this information is quite literally offline. Then one, we save our words. And two, we realize why it's so important to connect first, because what the connection is doing is helping them disarm the alarm. It's helping them reestablish the part of their brain online that can actually hear what you're trying to teach them. And so you're not just letting it go and going, well, I'm just being permissive by not teaching immediately. You're going, I understand that their brain is not processing this information. It's a burning building. Let's get them onto safe ground and evacuated. And then let's have this conversation when they're steady, firm, and calm down. And I think that, it's so easy to go to what we know, what we've experienced in and of ourselves, our own pasts and everything else too. But I think having that second pause and just going, burning building, you know that if someone tried to say it to you, it's not going in. And I suspect that might help some people to be able to go, okay, yep, that's what we mean. We've got to connect first. I'm trying to help them evacuate the building first, turn off the alarms, feel steady, and then we're going to try and do it. And so your calm, your steady presence is the thing that helps turn off that alarm, and that once they're safe, their thinking brain comes back on. In the heat of that moment, what can you do? Pause. Remember the power of the pause. Whenever you are not pausing, our initial response is what comes naturally. And that's usually whatever we've been grounded in our own experiences. And so it's really important to pause. And if you remember nothing else, I think it's your connection is what makes correction meaningful. It tells your child, you are safe. I am here. This isn't too big, and we're going to work through this together. And it's okay to come back to the lesson later when the brain's ready. You're not being permissive in that moment or letting it slide. You're actually going, I understand where your brain is at, and so I'm going to help you evacuate. Then let's do it then.
Oh, thank you so much for the reminder. I find that usually when the alarms are going, I always use that as an opportunity for a teaching moment. Like, it's a really good reminder, because when I think about it, it's only after we've evacuated and we're in that safe space that the actual teaching moments are actually a bit more effective. So thank you for that. Thank you for the reminder that when the alarms are going, teaching moments don't really matter. And thank you to everyone listening to our very first episode of Mom to Mom with Dr. Tash. If you found this conversation helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, or share this with a friend. It helps more moms find us. And we really want to hear from you. Send your thoughts, reflections, or parenting questions to hello@momsattethetable.com. Your questions might even help shape a future episode. And don't forget to read Dr. Tash's full article, What Your Child Really Needs First, at momsattethetable.com. We'll be back next month with another episode with more real parenting struggles and kind answers. Until then, remember to take the pause, take a breath, show yourself compassion, and remember, it all starts with connection.